50 billion rand extracted from the public treasury, a national law enforcement apparatus pushed to the very brink of collapse, and an institution established to protect constitutional democracy systematically weaponized from within. For years, the fragile machinery of state accountability faced relentless pressure as calculated political purges targeted the senior leadership of the police service. Millions of citizens watched as trust in state authorities steadily eroded under the weight of institutional compromise. Yet amidst this escalating crisis, National Police Commissioner General Fannie Masemola stood firm, steadfastly refusing to yield to a clandestine network, attempting to orchestrate his political removal. When a suppressed video recording suddenly re-emerged from the archives, it uncovered the covert maneuvers aimed at compromising the highest office of law enforcement. If the very institution mandated to defend the Constitution becomes a weapon for political power, who guards the integrity of the sovereign nation? Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. If this fight for accountability resonates with your spirit, show your support with a like. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe. Your voice keeps the story of justice alive. To understand the sheer gravity of this constitutional crisis, one must first survey the political battlefield. South Africa is a sovereign nation still deeply scarred by the era of state capture, a devastating period where billions of dollars were looted and the very architecture of governance was systematically dismantled. In the desperate aftermath, the Investigating Directorate was established. It was envisioned as the ultimate instrument of accountability, an independent sword designed specifically to sever the deeply entrenched ties between corrupt politicians and state resources. However, when an institution of such immense statutory power is quietly turned against the defenders of the state, it ceases to be an instrument of justice and becomes a weapon of pure power. At the direct center of this unfolding storm stands National Police Commissioner General Fannie Masemola, tasked with the monumental duty of stabilizing a fractured and highly scrutinized police service. General Masemola quickly found himself staring down a calculated administrative assassination. The mechanism chosen for this political purge was a Section 28 summons. This is not a polite request for information. It is an exceptional and draconian legal provision that grants sweeping investigative powers, forcing individuals to testify under oath. This specific summons was signed and authorized by Advocate Andrea Johnson, the head of the Investigating Directorate. The summons deliberately targeted the upper echelons of the National Police, specifically focusing on the promotion structures and the Presidential Protection Task teams flagrantly overstepping the Directorate's defined legal mandate. For months, the official narrative maintained by the state insisted that this was merely an administrative miscalculation, a routine bureaucratic procedure gone slightly awry. Yet beneath the sterile surface of official press briefings, a far more sinister reality was taking shape. The true architecture of this campaign was not born in the legal offices of the Investigating Directorate, but in the volatile, ruthless arena of factional politics. The ultimate objective was to remove General Masemola, thereby creating a dangerous leadership vacuum within the national police force that could be easily exploited during a highly fragile political transition. The existence of this hidden agenda was blown wide open by the sudden explosive emergence of a deleted video. This suppressed digital recording acted as the absolute catalyst, exposing the intense political pressure exerted by Julius Malema and his political allies. The footage laid bare a concerted, aggressive effort to force General Masemola out of his position. It became undeniably apparent that Advocate Andrea Johnson and the Investigating Directorate were being directed by an unseen political force. By attempting to oust the highest-ranking policeman in the nation, the political factions aligned with Julius Malema sought to install a compliant law enforcement leadership, effectively neutralizing any future investigations into their own affairs. This clash represents the ultimate battle between justice and power. On one side stands a police commissioner attempting to hold the line of constitutional law and order. On the other stands a coordinated political machinery determined to break that very line for personal leverage. The orchestrators of this attempted purge relied entirely on secrecy, operating through intermediaries and weaponized legal documents. They believed their influence would remain permanently concealed within the shadow of bureaucratic complexity, treating the justice system as their personal chessboard. But those who operate in the shadow often forget one crucial detail light always finds a way in. The confrontation reached its absolute boiling point inside the sterile, highly charged atmosphere of the public inquiry room. This was the moment the veneer of bureaucratic plausible deniability was violently stripped away under relentless questioning. Commissioner Khumalo leaned forward across the formal mahogany table, his voice carrying the accumulated weight of a nation demanding answers. He confronted Advocate Andrea Johnson with an uncompromising, forensic breakdown of the Section 28 summons. The central pillar of the inquiry was razor-sharp and devastatingly clear. Why had the Investigating Directorate launched an aggressive, unauthorized investigation into the Presidential Protection Task Team? How could a senior legal official authorize sweeping investigative powers while simultaneously claiming complete ignorance of the underlying target? Advocate Johnson sat visibly shaken as the evidence mounted against her. In her defense, she attempted to navigate the labyrinth of her own signature, pointing to thousands of documents crossing her desk and placing heavy reliance on her subordinates, particularly lead investigator Mr. Perumal. Yet the Commission rejected this defense out of hand. Commissioner Khumalo dismantled her excuses piece by piece, noting that paragraph 6 of the summons explicitly named the task team and the specific targets of the probe. To sign such a document without awareness, or worse, to claim that no such investigation existed while legally mandating it, was a fatal contradiction. The exchange exposed a profound institutional rot, where accountability was traded for plausible deniability, and where signed legal documents carried more weight than the truth spoken under oath. As the transcript of the hearing reverberated across national media outlets, the public reaction transformed from quiet skepticism into searing outrage. Citizens across the country watched in disbelief as the guardians of the law stumbled over their own justifications. The media narrative shifted overnight from a routine oversight review into an unprecedented institutional crisis. Commentators and legal experts alike began dissecting the hidden forces maneuvering behind the scenes, openly asking how an independent directorate could be so easily compromised by factional ambitions. The emotional temperature of the nation shifted sharply from anger to a profound collective mourning for the compromised independence of the state's most vital organs. Throughout the intense cross-examination, Advocate Johnson repeatedly invoked the shadow of an unseen mechanism, hinting at external pressures and unexplained discrepancies within the case files. When pressed by the panel to explain what forces could possibly have dictated the inclusion of the contested paragraphs, she conceded that she could not reconcile the contradictory affidavits presented to her. She noted receiving conflicting statements and late-stage Public Service Commission reports that should have halted the investigation entirely on the day they arrived. Yet these critical red flags were deliberately bypassed, swept under the rug by individuals whose primary loyalty lay outside the statutory boundaries of the law. The climax of the hearing laid bare the dangerous fragility of South Africa's young investigative institutions. When the head of an elite investigative body admits on public record that she cannot account for the origins of her own prosecutional decisions, the boundary between lawful governance and political capture dissolves entirely. The commissioners made it unequivocally clear that ignorance is not an acceptable defense when the stability of the entire national security apparatus is placed on the line. Advocate Johnson was left speechless, but the silence echoing in that room screamed a truth that would soon shake the entire nation. The domestic fallout of this institutional fracture extended far beyond the wood-paneled hearing rooms, deeply fracturing the fragile stability of South Africa's civil and political landscape. when the highest echelons of law enforcement are paralyzed by factional infighting and compromised oversight. The direct consequence is borne by ordinary citizens who rely on the state for basic security and constitutional protection. The revelation of administrative negligence within the Investigating Directorate sent shockwaves through the national economy, reinforcing the persistent anxiety surrounding state capture fallout. Investors and international rating agencies observed with mounting apprehension as the state anti-corruption machinery appeared vulnerable to internal political hijacking. Public trust, already strained by years of governance scandals, took yet another severe blow, leaving the citizenry to question whether genuine institutional reform is even possible within the current political framework. As these shocking developments dominated public discourse, the underlying political motives came sharply into focus. The controversies surrounding Julius Malema further polarized an already fragmented electorate, driving a deeper wedge between political loyalists and those demanding absolute institutional integrity. The political opposition capitalized on the administrative confusion, using the vulnerability of the police leadership to project an image of systemic state failure. Meanwhile, governing party loyalists scrambled to contain the political damage, desperately trying to decouple administrative incompetence from deliberate political sabotage. This relentless tug-of-war paralyzed key decision-making processes within the security cluster, leaving critical anti-crime initiatives stalled, while political factions bickered over institutional control. Now take a second right here to tell us where you are watching from. Type the name of your city, your state, or your country in the comments. South African Dynamics reads every single one with profound gratitude, and we send you a heartfelt wish may your journey be filled with strength, dignity, and unyielding truth. Let the comments below become a map of our shared demand for justice. The security implications of this leadership crisis proved equally alarming. General Fannie Masemola's resolute refusal to step down prevented an immediate collapse of command, but the damage to institutional morale was profound. Career investigators and frontline police officers found themselves caught in an intolerable crossfire between political masters and constitutional duties. When officers cannot trust that their superiors are shielded from factional purges, the operational effectiveness of the entire police service degrades rapidly. Intelligence sharing slowed down, high-profile investigations stalled in bureaucratic limbo, and morale plummeted to historic lows across the national policing structures. The internal stability of the nation was traded as a mere bargaining chip in a high-stakes game of political survival. Yet, despite the overwhelming pressure from political adversaries and compromised bureaucrats, the institutional resistance mounted by General Masemola demonstrated that the rule of law still possessed resilient defenders. The public began to realize that the fight was no longer just about a single disputed summons or an unauthorized investigation. It was a fundamental struggle for the survival of constitutional democracy itself. Every leaked document, every tense exchange under cross-examination, and every public revelation peeled back another layer of the deep-seated political rot that has plagued the nation post-transition era. The domestic landscape was left teetering on a razor edge of uncertainty, with the entire nation holding its collective breath to see how the executive branch would respond to the damning findings of the inquiry. But while South Africa wrestled with the ghosts of its own political machinery, external observers across the global diplomatic stage were preparing their own definitive verdict on the nation trajectory. Beyond the borders of the African continent, the institutional tremors rippling through Pretoria did not go unnoticed by global capitals, least of all Washington. For Western foreign policy architects and international financial markets, the stability of South Africa's constitutional architecture remains a critical anchor for regional security and economic partnership. When elite law enforcement bodies like the Investigating Directorate become entangled in partisan friction, international observers immediately recognize the broader systemic risks. Foreign investors weighing the security of their capital against the creeping shadows of institutional decay view these developments through a very strict prism of accountability versus impunity. Diplomatic cables exchanged across Western embassies in recent months have increasingly focused on the preservation of statutory independence within South Africa's security cluster. The ongoing turbulence, dramatically underscored by the intense public inquiries and the unfolding political maneuvers surrounding Julius Malema and his opposition faction, presents a profound dilemma for foreign partners. Washington understands that a compromised justice system directly undermines the country's ongoing efforts to exit the grey list of global financial watchdogs threatening billions of dollars in foreign direct investment. It is within this tense geopolitical chessboard that the strategic significance of Fannie Masemola revenge becomes fully apparent, symbolizing a high-stakes pushback against political overreach that resonates deeply with international analysts monitoring democratic resilience across the global South. The international media framing has thus transitioned from superficial political reporting to a rigorous examination of whether post-apartheid institutions possess the structural resilience to withstand internal factional capture. Global organizations and strategic think tanks have consistently argued that sustainable development and foreign partnership require absolute predictability in the rule of law. When political actors attempt to bend law enforcement agencies to secure tactical advantages, they inadvertently signal to the world stage that sovereign governance remains vulnerable to partisan interference. As foreign diplomats evaluate the fallout from these high-level inquiries, the pressure mounts on Pretoria's executive leadership to restore absolute clarity and constitutional adherence. The eyes of the international community remain locked on the unfolding legal battles, recognizing that the outcome will set a definitive precedent for how emerging democracies defend their foundational pillars against internal subversion. The diplomatic lines had been drawn, but the ultimate verdict on the nation's institutional integrity would not be decided in foreign capitals. As the dust settles over the commission rooms and public inquiries, the road ahead for South Africa's law enforcement architecture remains fraught with profound challenges and pivotal opportunities. The resilience demonstrated by National Police Commissioner General Fannie Masemola has rewritten the playbook on institutional resistance against political overreach. Yet, the systemic vulnerabilities that allowed an elite investigative directorate to be weaponized in the first place have not magically vanished. True reform requires far more than surviving a single political storm. It demands a total structural overhaul to ensure that the guardians of the law remain permanently insulated from factional manipulation. The path toward enduring sovereignty and economic stability hinges entirely on whether the state can purge the shadows from its administrative corridors and restore absolute integrity to its highest offices. For millions of citizens watching from both domestic townships and international diasporas, this moment represents a profound test of national character. The fierce commitment to accountability shown by those who refuse to bow to hidden pressures serves as a powerful reminder that justice is never freely given. It must be constantly defended. As the nation looks toward its next electoral and legislative cycles, the ultimate question is whether state institutions can reclaim their independence without compromise. This is not merely about preserving individual careers or settling factional scores. It is about safeguarding the foundational promise of a democratic society where no political figure, regardless of how influential, stands above the law. The seat of power must once again become a sanctuary for public service, rather than a boardroom for backroom deals. When institutional leaders stand their ground against unlawful interference, they ignite a quiet flame of hope that resonates far beyond national borders. The journey ahead is undeniably arduous, peppered with political resistance and bureaucratic inertia, but the collective memory of what was nearly lost will serve as an unyielding shield. South Africa stands at a historic crossroads, where the triumph of constitutional order over partisan ambition proves that dignity and truth can still prevail against the most formidable odds. The storm that threatened to tear the security cluster apart has momentarily subsided, but the deeper currents of political transformation are only just beginning to stir. Ban kodongi voinoi dongkuafan nei kong toise chi tiep tok kiban sak nan. As we draw this critical investigation to a close, we must confront the sobering reality of what this high-stakes institutional clash truly signifies for modern democracy across the developing world. The public battles, the tense parliamentary inquiries, and the sweeping revelations surrounding Julius Malema exposed have laid bare the fragile line separating lawful governance from partisan political manipulation. When elite investigative bodies are co-opted by hidden political networks, the entire fabric of constitutional integrity hangs by a thread. Yet through this profound institutional crisis, the resolute stand witnessed during Fannie Masemola revenge has proven that institutional bravery can still mount a formidable defense against calculated political overreach. It is a powerful reminder that accountability is never guaranteed by legislation alone. It is secured by individuals willing to stand firm when the immense pressures of power attempt to bend the rule of law. Looking toward the horizon, the road ahead remains fraught with systemic challenges, economic anxieties, and relentless political turbulence. But as the truth behind Julius Malema exposed continues to resonate across global capitals, it sparks an enduring hope that sovereign institutions can ultimately reclaim their independence and serve the citizens without fear or favor. What lies ahead for a nation standing at such a historic crossroads? If a society manages to protect its highest offices from the shadows of factional capture, can true equality and unyielding justice finally become the permanent foundation of its future?